Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rawlins Rambles. Now, you might be thinking two things when I say welcome back. One, you may be thinking, like my mom did, you have a video series? Or two, really? You're going to try again to create some semi-consistent video series? You failed twice. But I just got back from a weekend with Engineers Without Borders, where we focused on advocating for innovative financing in the developing world to promote a more equitable and less poverty-ridden world. And I'm just really inspired to get back on the horse. One of the main points of the weekend was advocacy is our acknowledgement of our individual limits and our ask for help. Ask for the help of others, whether that's the government, whether that's our friends and family, or the general public. It's acknowledging that we can't do it on our own. We are limited in our own abilities, in our expertise, and we just need others. We need each other to make anything good happen. So again, what are we doing with this series? We're going through the Sustainable Development Goals, which Canada was a part of creating, along with the other 192 member states of the United Nations, and there are 17 goals for a better world. We went through the first one, which was ending poverty. The second goal is ending hunger. There are different targets within each Sustainable Development Goal, and so we're going to go through them. Again, this series is this idea of, hey, if we're going to reach these SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we're going to have to actually know about them. And as Canadians, we don't. No one knows about the SDGs. And the target year is 2030. So we need to get on our horse if we actually think we're going to achieve them. And I'm a believer that if we don't see the issue, we're not going to actually take any steps towards solving it. So this is a video series, is an opportunity or an attempt to see the issue for what it is and to discuss what we can do as individuals to take steps towards solving these incredible issues. So, ending hunger. The main overarching goal is end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. So three main things. How is it measured? Well, with targets. So by 2030, end hunger and ensure access by all people, and with a focus on poor and vulnerable. Second target is by 2030, end all forms of malnutrition, including ending stunting and wasting in children under 5 by 2025, and address the nutritional needs of young women and lactating women. By 2030, double agricultural productivity. By 2030, ensure sustainable food production. And by 2020, maintain genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, and farmed and domesticated animals. So a bunch in there. Why are all these goals in there? Well, let's try and see the facts, see the issue. Why are we focused on these things? Well, I'm sure we're all aware that hunger is an issue around the world, but if you aren't, there's about 793 million people who are undernourished in the world today. So that's more than 1 in 7. If you line up the world's population, every 7 people doesn't get enough food to eat, or the right food to eat. In a given year, about 5.6 million children under the age of 5 die. About half of these are due to nutritional deficiencies. That's 7,000 children under the age of 5 every day die. 7,000 children every day die because they don't get the right food or enough food to eat. 7,000 children. Not all children who experience food insecurity die, but 23% of all children in the world, so 1 in 4 children experience stunting, which is they don't grow to their full potential because of their food insecurity, because of nutritional deficiencies. To maybe see this problem a bit more personally, my niece little Lottie was just born a couple weeks ago, and just the thought of her parents, my sister Julia and my brother-in-law David, not having the opportunity to provide sufficient food for their child, for little Lottie. It just blows my mind that 1 in 4 sets of parents, 1 in 4 pairs of parents have to deal with that. So it's not just the child, it's the parents not being able to provide. Every 1 in 4 children experience stunting. That would just blew my mind. At the same time, you have this issue of undernourishment, and yet we have 40 million children under 5 now obese or overweight, and along with this overfeeding or over consumption, we waste $750 billion of food a year. $750 billion of food a year is thrown out, not consumed. This issue is obviously made even bigger when we think about that by 2050, the world's population is going to be 9.6 billion people. And so again, we have this issue of undernourishment, yet overnourishment at the same time, wasted food, thrown out food. The World Health Organization suggests the cost of ending hunger globally is $40 billion a year, and yet we throw away $750 billion of food a year. Is Canada, so this is a global issue, is Canada any better? Can we kind of use the excuse, it's over there, I can't have an impact? Unfortunately, no, we can't hide behind that excuse because 1.5 million households in Canada, so about 4 million people, face food insecurity. 890,000 people in the month of March. I couldn't believe that. Almost 1 million people went and used food banks across Canada. And yet, so there's this undernourishment, this food insecurity, and yet at the same time, Canada wastes $30 billion of food annually. Compared to developing world nations where that waste is primarily due to an inability to preserve food and lack of technology like refrigeration. In Canada, actually, the majority of that waste, 51% of that waste, comes at the household and consumer level. That's me and you. 51% of that $30 billion of food is wasted because of us. So globally, on Canadian soil, this is an issue. So hopefully we see how big of an issue it is. How then shall we live? What can we do about it as individuals in our everyday lives? I think the first thing we have to do is, and it might sound weird, but be grateful for what you have been given. Just understand how rare it is to live each day, not even thinking about not having enough to eat. Maybe you don't like what you're having, but never feeling, oh, darn. Or if you don't have enough in the fridge, okay, it's a 10-minute drive away to get it. So that's the first thing, be grateful. But the second thing is tied on to that great gratitude, which I don't think the gratitude does anything unless it's tied to this, is realize your obligation. To whom much, one of my favorite quotes, to whom much is given, much is expected. We are given so much as Canadians, and so much is expected of us. Jesus Christ had something to say about living for other people. I think some pretty amazing things to say. And one of his famous lines is, "I was hungry and you fed me." And just that idea of this is so important. We are called, if you're a Christian, we're called to meet the food and nutritional needs of the people around us, globally and here at home. Which brings us to the next point. This is a global issue, which means in other countries, but as well in our own communities, in our own cities, people are facing the dilemma of, should I pay for rent or should I pay for groceries for my children? And then, so what can we actually do? How then shall we live? Well, think about it. Go find your food bank, your community food bank. Ask what they actually need. What do they often run out of? That's important. Are they serving nutritionally dense foods, or do they not have the resources to buy them? Just consider what you can do to help out your fellow Canadians, your fellow community members, because it's real. It's happening right now. Remember, almost 1 million people across Canada went to food banks in a single month. Number 4, which is an easy one, again, coming back to this theme of using your voice. Talk to your friends and family about the SDGs, but hunger. An easy one, the internet has made it so easy to use our voices in cooperation with one another. And there's a petition right now, End Food Waste in Canada, on change.org. You can sign it, and you can call your MP, go to a meeting that they have, an open town hall, use your voice and say, hey, this is important. Specifically, this petition is to put in a regulation on food distributors, so like your local food market, to prohibit them from throwing out or discarding food that is perfectly good but past its due date. Because unfortunately, that's what happens here. In the UK, they've made a law. In France, they've made a law. But in Canada, we still allow our distributors to throw out food that we as consumers deem unconsumable because it's one day past the date. So also, don't waste your food. Make sure you plan and understand the impact that not planning has on the people around you, because that's perfectly good food that could be donated to a food bank, or and then 5, the 5th thing is sustainable agriculture. Remember, that was a goal, and we kind of think, oh well, that's not me. I'm not a farmer. I have no idea how farming works. But maybe that's the invitation to think about it. Think about how the food you eat impacts people around the world, because we live in a global world. Where is it coming from? Those strawberries, when you get them in January, what country are they coming from? What is that doing to their local economy? Is it good for them, or is it ruining their agricultural practices? Is it creating monopolies? Maybe it is fantastic. Maybe it isn't. Just think about it. Let's actually become informed citizens. And I think my favorite thing about this whole idea of sustainable agriculture is my diet actually sustainable to be adopted if it was adopted by 9.6 billion people by 2050? Is it sustainable? Because if we're actually going to meet these SDGs, if we're actually going to see a world that is more fair and equitable, that's saying, hey, I think you deserve a life that I have, or I believe that we actually deserve the same thing. We're equally worth it, I guess. And if you can't see a world that shares your diet, then there's a little misalignment with how we're thinking, isn't there? We're kind of, oh yeah, you can kind of get better, but I don't want to sacrifice my lifestyle because life is about having for me. Which I guess the last thing I'll say is this challenge to maybe, I think, to reach all the sustainable development goals, but hunger as well. This fantastic verse in the Bible, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. I think that's the key to meeting any of these sustainable development goals. Looking not to our own interests, so not securing my perfect diet or what I want to eat, or even saying this now, it's really challenging. But actually thinking about, hey, there are people out there that I'm interested in. I'm putting them above me, and I actually want to see them live a life that is free of looking for scraps or scrambling together money for rent versus food. I don't want to see that. I want to see them live joyful and happy lives where they can think about helping others. Which is cool, because coming back to Henry Nouwen's Life of the Beloved, maybe it's not the worst to sacrifice our lives or our having or our security. He suggests that, and this is the last thing I'll end off with, we often live as if our happiness depended on having. But I don't know anyone who is really happy because of what he or she has. True joy, happiness, and inner peace come from the giving of ourselves to others. The giving of ourselves to others. A happy life is a life for others. Wow, that's just so powerful, and can't wait to discuss with you guys and see maybe what we can do to live that out, to live for others in how we distribute our food, what we buy. Anyways, so excited. Have a great week.